All right, so this, for those of you who've been around for a few months, the DAO commissioned um, artist, I think his name's Mir, in the Discord to start with some artistic direction for the realm's presentation images, and so this is his final. This is his final piece interpretation of what a realm is in his style, which is pretty epic. So he delivered this the other day, and this will be used as one of the assets around the game. So agenda for today, GM. I'm just going to give a quick update on the StarkNet status, update on lore, update on the bot, what the DAO is currently building, some update for some other DAO situations, and we've also have a new core lord that has joined called Tenox, and I'll get into that as well. Indexer 101, just explain that. Give a update on the settling game, overview on Desiege, Tokenmonics update around single-sided staking on StarkNet, and a sneak peek of the settling, and then Q&A, and also Crypts, some updates on Crypts, which I didn't put in here. So yeah, the update on StarkNet, currently on version 0.8 right now. The next version is in 3 weeks, and the beta is still on track for Q2. It's developing really fast, and for those of you that have listened to some of the Twitter spaces with Reaper and myself, it's come up a few times about how interesting that the thing is getting built on StarkNet is right now, and everybody that's building, all the teams, we're all kind of figuring out together and sharing notes about the best way to build these things, and the sharing packages with one another. So it's really great to see. Look, it's probably unlikely that we're going to hit the migration on at the end of Epoch 15, just because we are beholden to StarkNet right now. But it's definitely still on track for Q2. I can't give an exact date, but it is what it is. We are building on the cutting edge of blockchain right now, so we are beholden to the network status. But we are building everything quickly, and we will be running alpha and a beta as soon as that is ready, which should be within the next few weeks, at least internally, and then we'll open it up. Update on the lore module. You've probably heard us drop some hints about how the lore module will work. We will be baking in a on-chain lore content module into the Atlas, which will allow you to write your own stories for any of the asset you own. They'll all be deep linked, and it'll be a really interesting experience, and everything will be on-chain, running on StarkNet as well. So more updates will come in the next few weeks on that. I'm sure everyone's been acquainted to the Squire bot. We spent a bit of time kind of rethinking about what a bot could be and the structure of it. So we built him up from the ground, and he can do a lot of things. He fetches what you want without asking questions, so feel free to use him. And he also posts to Twitter and Discord when requested. If anybody has any suggestions about what you think a bot should do, drop them in the suggestions channel, and we can just build it into the bot. It's very easy to extend now, so you can basically do whatever you want. It can fetch any information on the internet and post it into a channel, or it can combine information from two things and post it into a channel. It's limited of your imagination. So I thought I'd just give an overview of everything that we are building, because we don't do that many updates. We are very heavily dev focused, but there's a lot going on in the background. Firstly, we've started to build a StarkNet indexer, which I'll go over in the next slide. We're building a bunch of different Caro contracts any GitHub nerds or people with GitHub accounts, you can keep track on the progress by just looking at the GitHub hooks channel. Every post to the open source repositories get posted there. We're working on the game UI, which I'm going to give an update a bit later. We're going to be converting the Biblio site into React. We've designed a whole component library and monorepo structure to allow for quick iteration and quick building of small apps. Same with the loot realms.xyz. We're going to be building that for SEO purposes, so people that don't. So we know currently the SEO is a bit wacky because Biblio and Realms is a little confusing to outsiders. So we're going to build a specific site for Realms just to improve the SEO purposes for that. Building an open source component library, which will allow people to fork and build their own apps with the same styles. Then the law module, and then we also have a bunch of art assets that are being conceptualized at the moment, like the original, like the cover image that I just showed you. We have a bunch of artists lined up, and we're working with them. There'll be some updates on that in the next couple of weeks as well. I hope everyone's picked some kind of council. You can pick one, or you can pick them all. We will. This is the move to try to streamline, efficiency within the DAO and delegate small tasks to willing members. The exact mechanics around conversation is still being worked out, but we probably will have a job and bounty board in one of the Web3 native apps. I think it's called. Tim, what was that one called? I thought I put it in the slide. Oh, here it is.
Keyword. Yeah, there you
go. Yeah. Also, we've added 2 new multisigs to the multisig. Grug and Neotins. These lords have been around since the early days, pre-mint. Have been some of the most loyal lords. So they also have a big background in finance and general account management. So we'll be adding them to the multisig. This is the current assets that the multisig contains. So it's 183,000 USDC. It's got 20% of the Lord's allocation. That's unminted currently, just because we'll be minting it when the allocation is needed. 25 realms and an LP position. So there's quite a lot of assets. So all the fees from OpenSea flow directly into that currently. Just went over the councils. That was a duplicate. So we'll probably be using dwork.xyz or something similar to document all these. The other thing is that we will be having a Builders Council specific roundtable next week or the following to go into more detail. We weren't going to go over that today because we have a lot to cover, but more updates on that to come. So yeah, I just thought it would be a good idea just to explain what an indexer is from a high level point of view for people that are wondering, and like why we are building this thing. In mainnet and on Arbitrum and just any general EVM chain, there is a indexer that most people use, and it's called the graph, which I'm sure everybody's heard of. And the graph is good, and we did use it for our alpha game, but it is still limiting in what you can do with it. And so basically all an indexer is that it's a cache of the actual blockchain. Because querying a blockchain sucks. It's slow, and you can't get a massive amount of data in one query. So every dApp that you use right now will either be using the graph or their own indexer. Like OpenSea, they have to run their own indexer, for better or worse. But so this is why we're building this thing. So basically all it does is it listens for events. So when you do a transaction on StarkNet, and it records that event into the indexer database, and then from the client side, so as in the user interface, it just requests that information from the indexer. So this means that the user experience is significantly faster, and the user interface is much more efficient, which ultimately, as we scale, is incredibly important. So we came to this, realization when we realized the graph wasn't going to be suitable about a month ago. And this is so this is why we're building it. And Tenox, the new core lord, this is going to be one of his main responsibilities to help build this. We've got it to a point where it's usable, but it's one of the infrastructure that we're building from scratch for the game to allow for efficient scalability. So yeah, if you have any questions about that, just drop it. I'm not going to go too deep into the technicals, but I thought it would be nice just to explain why we are doing that. Okay, so the next big update, which I'm sure everyone's been eager to hear about, is the Desiege minigame. So it's in internal testing right now, where I thought that it was going to be ready by today, but we opened it up to the community lords to test for bugs and whatnot, and it's just not ready just yet. So, but we're hoping it's going to be ready in the next week. And so I'll just give an overview of what it is. We have been talking that it's a tower defense game, but it's really a massively multiplayer light versus dark game. So it is a little simple, but we've built this, like, the reason why we built this game is that it's giving us an opportunity to test all our infrastructure before the main game launches, and it's fun and it's experimental at a large scale. And to play it, you'll need lords. You'll need to hold lords. So you'll need to hold 625 lords to play, but it doesn't get spent. It just checks that you have that in your wallet. And the Squire bot posts every action to Twitter and Discord. So this is a current game in action. I've actually casted all my spells, so I can't cast any more spells. But simply how it works is you mint tokens, whether you're light or dark, and you can cast them into the shield. Like, if you're dark, you cast into the shield and you try to take down the shield and destroy the city. And if you're light, you can boost the shield with your tokens, and keep the city alive. And the games go for 24 hours. And the longer the game goes, so you can see we're at the end here, your tokens do more boost, more damage, basically. So the longer the game goes, the more powerful your tokens are. And so what it does is it encourages off-chain kind of coordination within the Discord. So there are some secret channels that will appear once you start playing, and you'll be able to coordinate if you're light or dark, and hopefully either destroy the city or save the city, depending on your allegiance. So I'm probably going to do I'll do a Desiege specific chat when it's ready. I'm banking on next week, and we are pushing as hard as we can, but we are doing a lot of things at the same time. So, but it will be a lot of fun when it launches, and I think it needs to just bugs just appear in these things, so we're just getting it perfect before we do launch. So that's the current status on Desiege. Yeah, just went over this. So yeah, games 1 to 3 will be Realm Lords only, and then games 4+ will be open to the public. And this game will be able to scale to 1,000 people. There's no reason why I can't. So it will be interesting. That's for sure. Okay, so next big subject is the Lord's Tokenomics. So I just want to give an overview of what exactly we are building, and it's more than just one game. We're really building this game protocol layer that allows every expansion of a game, or multiple games, all running in tandem. So we, as a DAO, haven't taken any over-the-counter funding with Lords yet. It's something we might do in the future, but anything that we do on that will obviously have to be a DAO vote. So, and this, because we haven't done this, it allows greater ownership of the protocol to people who want to participate now. And so the planned utility for the Lords, everything on the marketplace will be denominated in Lords. This is on StarkNet. The pairing of the resources on the AMM will have Lords as the pair. So just like how you pair Lords with ease currently, if you supply the Uniswap position, it'll be like Wood and Lords as the pairing. You'll be able to stake it in the King's Bank and earn tributes. You'll be able to stake your LP tokens, and you'll also be able to earn tributes. And it is used to purchase unique buildings and items in the game itself. So the King's Bank is a it's just a contract, and this is on StarkNet. If you stake your Lords within the King's Bank, you will earn tribute generated from you earn a percentage of the tribute generated from all the whole land. So the transaction fee on the NFT market is 5%, and so 1 to 2.5% of that will flow into the King's Bank. On the AMM, 1 to 2% of those fees will flow into the King's Bank, and the other percentages will flow into the multi-sig for continued development. The exact tribute percentage has not been confirmed yet, and the way the tributes get distributed is from the previous epoch, the amount that's been deposited in the previous epoch. So it's a perpetual staking contract that's not inflationary. So all the tribute that gets filled up into the King's Bank is from the fees generated from the whole protocol layer. So it's not there's no net increase in Lords emissions. It's just Lords recycled within the protocol. I'm sure I'm going to have some questions about that later. So, and so on the AMM, you provide. Actually, just firstly, so we actually bountied Milky Taste to build this AMM contract, and we're just doing the final rounds of testing, and then we'll finish that contract and we will implement it. So thanks Milky Taste for doing this, and it's actually StarkNet's first ever 1155 AMM, which is pretty crazy. And so the way it works is it's very similar to Uniswap in like traditional AMM on mainnet. You provide both sides of the market, so you provide 50% Lords, 50% Wood, and when you do that, you do generate a fee from that LP position. But what you'll also be able to do is you'll be able to stake your LP tokens. So when you create an LP position, you get returned LP tokens, and then you'll be able to stake those LP tokens in a contract and earn some of the King's rewards, which will incentivize people to keep the market liquid. But also, that's also it's a non-inflationary reward system because it's just recycling the Lords. So, just going to do a quick. I've been dropping some teasers into this into the chat around the settling UI prototype. Now we have built a bunch of this in React code already. It's not quite ready to show publicly. I think in a week or so I'm going to do some. I'll pop some GIFs in. But just to touch on kind of UI, and for any UI nerds out there, we are building this as like an open component library within Figma. So all these components, like the buttons and the sidebar and the tables and whatnot, they're all just reusable components in this big library, and we will make it open source, which will allow anybody just to whip up any UI that they like. So you can see from the styling, we're going to be using Jose's images as the backdrop for each page. And so this will be your main realms view. And when you search, you'll be able to search by ID, search traits, orders, rarity, resources, see your realms, see all realms, see your favorite realms. This is like your quick view tag, where you'll see your resource production, some of your statistics, some of your military statistics. You have to fly to it within the atlas, and if you click in detail, you'll see more. You'll see like a deeper view of that realm. And so this is where the combat module bit will be as well, and any like deeper actions that you need to do to improve your realm. So increase the resource production, build buildings, build troops. You'll be able to see the history of all the realm, everything that's happened on your realm. This is a early. I thought I'd just show this as well because this is an early prototype of what the NFT market will look like. This is also in active development, so any UI nerds out there that think they can add a lot of value to this, just reach out to me, because these things are, we don't want to make this, a NFT clone, an NFT market clone, right? This is it's a game NFT market, and we want it to, represent that from the user experience point of view. And so this is the Iron Bank view. So this is where you'll go to see all your resource balances, your production output per day, the market change currently of that resource, and the current price. And this is the prototype of the resource swap, which is the AMM. And so the way it works is similar to like Uniswap, how you select one, you select your main resource, and you select both assets. But within this, excuse me, sorry. With it, sorry. With this one, you can select multiple assets at the same time. So you can select wood, ignium, diamonds. It will get your exchange rate, so whatever it is, and it will tell you how many lords that's going to cost. And if you hit trade, it'll trade those resources for the lords amount all at once. So you could do this up to 22 at a time. It's like a bulk AMM transfer, and you could do it in reverse as well. You could sell up to 22 or 26, 28 at a time as well. This will be able to provide LP positions, and you'll also be able to stake in the King's Bank. The other thing that I realized we haven't done a specific press on is the Atlas. So this is also, for those of you that haven't explored it, I'm sure most people on the call have, we have just added in the past week the loot bags and the GA bags. Oh. So I suggest everyone go and explore this. There's a lot to explore, and this is kind of like the settling game, the UI I just showed you. So that whole atlas will be the backdrop of the game, and so when you click the tabs, this whole panel will slide up, and the atlas will be behind it. So it'll be this view. So you'll be able to either explore the atlas and click on each asset, which if you're a maniac, you can do that, or you can do a deep search and find the exact asset you're looking for here, and then fly to it, or do your damage to it, or build it, or whatever you want to do. So this is where you can see there's a lot of thought that went into this this map and the technology stack of it. And the cool thing about this whole atlas is that it's running in WebGL, so you can have this epic scale. I mean, there's like 20,000 points of interest on this map. It's a little laggy unless you have a decent computer, and we're going to work on some performance issues for that. but ultimately it's very scalable, and yeah. So Threep, do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, I'll hop in. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I guess I'll give you maybe a next slide when I'm ready for the next one. So let's stick on this one for a second.
Right.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Threepwave. I have presented on the Loot Town Square before, or Town Hall Town Square, but I haven't been here to the Realms Lord's Table before. So thank you for having me. Crypts Caverns is a project that I started back in August when Loot launched, and I've collaborated in the open with a bunch of people in this chat and in the Lootverse to try and bring a sense of place for the Lootverse. I was really inspired by the items and the different bags that came out, and I saw Realms drop and release a bunch of different maps, and I was really curious about if you could visit each of those places or some places on Realms. Like, what would you do there? What would be the things you would do with your friends when you go on these adventures? And so that's kind of how this project started. And I'd let you hit the next one. So when I started figuring out what to put into Crypts and Caverns and what we would need to have a sense of place in Lootverse, I first started looking at a bunch of different classic games. My background is in virtual reality, world building, and a little bit of game design, working on small games. And so I started to realize that most games need floors and a wall, meaning where can you walk, where can you not walk, where can you fly, where can you not fly. So if you go to the next slide, you can see how if you took this classic map from Zelda, you could break it down to its components and say, hey, if you pull the enemies off for a moment, there's some places you can walk, which I show here with a 1. There's some walls, which in theory you can imagine like a 0. And then there's a few points on the map, like a door that you could access, or maybe an interactive bush, or a boulder you can break, etc. And so Crypts and Caverns have really, really simple geometry for each of them. It's all generated on chain. There's 9,000 of them. They basically have walls, floors, doors, and points. And then there's some additional metadata that we're not going to get into today. But if you're curious about it, you can poke around the collection and see things like environments, things like different rulers, points of interest, affinities, legendary maps, etc. But at its core, this is kind of the starting point for the collection. Next slide, please. And so when we started talking with Loaf, and I actually think Ira Thudmore, who's going to talk in a bit, was the person who kicked off this conversation in earnest, we were thinking about, like, if Realms is the world map, what if dungeons are a place you can explore? And so this was the initial concept I had in the very beginning. And I don't think the integration will work exactly like this. I don't think you'll go to a city within your realm and you'll visit your dungeon yet. But I wanted to give just a sense of this was the initial inspiration of how these two projects could come together. And so if Realms is the world map, dungeons will become a place you can explore, a place you can go on adventures, and a place that you can visit and interact with. You can go to the next slide, please. And so with that context in mind, Ira made a post in the Realms Discord and had some ideas about how we could tie these two together, and that sent everyone's wheels spinning. And now the Realms team and the Crypts and Caverns teams are basically working together as one team. So today you have me, Threepwave, here as an engineer, kind of a product manager as well, collaborating with the Realms team. So some of the UI that Loaf just showed, I had some input on and helped him try to figure out. And Ira Thudmore is also helping out on the game design piece. And so what I really like about this model is it's not a model where we built some stuff on Crypts and Caverns, we throw it over the wall, and the Realms team sees it, does some integration, and we're just done with that. This is a deep integration where, at least for the next 6 months, this is basically where I spend all my time. I've been spending more time in the Realms Discord than the Crypts and Caverns Discord. Sorry to my local community about that. But I just wanted this group to have a key takeaway that these teams are working together incredibly closely. Next slide, please. And so the second thing I wanted to share with this group, and this is the first time we've said this out loud, so this is for me a major takeaway. We didn't want to share things until we kind of finalized our direction, and so you'll notice we're playing things pretty close to the chest on the Crypts and Caverns integration because we don't want to share misinformation or something that might change dramatically and cause someone to collect the wrong dungeon, etc. And so one thing I hope that you take away from this presentation is that the project we're working on has multiple phases. And so just like with realms, you could stake a realm and you could, during the journey, and you could accrue lords. We are going to have the first phase where you can stake a dungeon and you will earn resources. And I share this as a phase because I don't want everyone to think that the scope of our integration is to stake my dungeon, I earn some resources, and I'm done. That's actually not how this is going to work. The dungeon staking is almost the first baby step towards a much more interesting interactive game that fits into the realms ecosystem based on Crypts and Caverns and dungeons, where you can earn items. And so think of step one is you stake a dungeon, you can earn resources. We'll talk about those in a second. Step two is there's a much larger in scope game where we've been starting to think about how do we make a really fun, interesting game that interacts with the rest of realms, with the different concepts like characters and the items table, etc., that takes place in your dungeon itself. Next slide, please. And so when we were thinking through this, I want to focus on that first phase for a moment, because the second phase around the game is still in the early stages of being figured out. But we have a pretty good idea of what those resources will look like. And so for those of you that have spent a lot of time looking at realms maps, you'll remember that there's a number of resources on each realm. And so we wanted to make sure that when we brought Crypts and Caverns dungeons into this ecosystem, that we weren't just taking the same realms resources and making new ways for you to earn those same resources. We wanted to bring a unique set of resources to the table. So for example, there are some resources from the loot contract that are missing in realms, and there's some other resources that we'll come up with. And I will talk through those in a second. So principle number one was make these unique to dungeons, not just a copy and paste of what's in realms. Second is we want to make sure that they interact with both the dungeon game and the settling game. So rather than having a total standalone experience where you can stake a dungeon, you earn some resources, you can then spend those to build out your dungeon, we wanted there to be a lot of interoperability and a lot of interplay to make it interesting. So you had interesting decisions around, do I want to buy more dungeons? Do I want to buy more realms? Do I want to stake these realms and these dungeons, etc.? So you'll see that as we continue to build this out, these two ecosystems are tightly intertwined. It's not just a dungeon game and staking contract off to the side. It's going to feel like one game together. And finally, it's really important that we tightly couple to the loot lore. That's one of the most important constraints for us when we think of building, is that everything should be derived from all the work the community has done in pulling this canonical lore out of the contract. And so having those three principles in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Ira Fedmore to talk through how he came up with the specific resources for Crypts and Caverns.
Thanks, Street, for the awesome introduction. My name is Ira Fedmore. Everyone just sort of calls me Ira. I first want to say thanks for letting me come here and talk about what has been sort of a really exciting project that has just sort of grown beyond what I think I initially thought. And man, this has just sort of been awesome. So I'm a crypto person, and DeFi DJ, and hodler, whatever you want to call it. I've been in crypto for 5 years, from way back in the masternoding days. I've been in game design for way longer than that. That has sort of been my contribution to the Crypts and Caverns project, is sort of Creep and I bounce ideas off of each other. We talk about sort of what we think the experience that we want people to have is going to be, and what the best ways are to implement that. I know that the question that a lot of people ask often is, what is loot? I kind of view it as decentralized, a lot of improvisation. Everyone is sort of saying yes and to each other, in the same way that Creep was saying about the coupling and decoupling of information, and that Crypts and Caverns are that sense of place within that world. We already sort of covered the origin stories of things. To get a little bit more into the items and sort of the justifications behind those items, we thought to ourselves what kinds of places within Crypts and Caverns exist, and going a little bit further beyond sort of the association of, like the biomes themselves, we started thinking about the types of ways that those worlds would be used. When you go to the desert oasis, what do you find? When you go to the stone temple, what do you find? How does this fit into a larger MMO world? And one of the first things that sort of affects that is, what are the items that you're receiving from these things? What are the resources that you're receiving from these things? And how does that enable future modules to riff off of that, to improvise additionally? And so we kind of feel like we have this responsibility to deliver the realm's resources, which are Divine Cloth and Demon Hide, but also to sort of establish like a base set of items that allows those future modules to sort of add on to the loot lore universe without subtracting from it. And so we have this initial set of resources that come out from the individual Crypts and Caverns maps, and I can sort of give you a little bit of the background for each one of those. We can start off with desert glass, which is associated with the desert oasis biome. The specific thing that I was trying for with desert glass is that it is an impact type, meaning it's like a scientific thing that happens when a high energy event strikes sand. And the implication there, and it's a really cool looking kind of glassy thing that we're going to be creating for it that's sort of tinged slightly in a goldish color. And the motivation there is to be able to say that some cataclysmic event happened in the loot universe and to allow others to tell that specific story, but to give you a prop that allows you to do that. So this can be a comet or a fireball or a bolt of divine lightning that occurred. But that is sort of what creates desert glass, which is the resource that drops from, primarily from that map. Next is the Stone Temple, which has divine cloth. This is supposed to be a reference, one, to the resource, and two, also to sort of the mage path from the actual original loot items. There's supposed to be a bit of mystery there as to why so much divine cloth is coming from these stone temples. What happened to the people that were wearing them? What are we using them for? The idea is that for all of these items, that they can be either upgraded or refined into like smaller or large components. So in the case of like desert glass, that could become a blade or an arrowhead. Or in the case of divine cloth, it could become it could be broken down into some sort of ethereal thread or integrated into cloth armor or something like that. For the forest ruins, we have the idea of a curious spore, is what we like to call it. Part of the goal was to have sort of one kawaii item, something cute and interesting, that sort of spoke to sort of the mysterious, fantastic nature of the world. There's part of the goal visually is probably going to be to establish like some kind of connection with like otherworldly spirits and sort of the mushroomy psychedelic fashion. But that's another way of sort of establishing a connection to some other story that other people can potentially utilize if they want to, and if they don't want to, they don't necessarily have to, and it can just be a mushroom spore. For the mountain deep, there's this notion of unrefined ore. Why isn't it refined? Was someone specifically mining that ahead of time? Is sort of the lore that can speak to that. Functionally, from a game design standpoint, I'm viewing this as an economic safeguard. I won't go into the details of it, but effectively, if we have something that is a container for other resources, then that can have varying rates of resources that allow us to have economic stability. It's just something that I like to think about before we get into actual the details of future development, just to be able to make sure that we can deliver something that isn't terribly volatile in pricing. The sunken shekel is the resource most closely associated with the underwater keep, and that is sort of it's a bit of a lore item that also has utility to it. You can't have an underwater keep without sunken treasure. The thinking is that there may be like an Atlantis-inspired narrative there, as opposed to just sort of a generic sunken treasure of doubloons. And obviously, why is it sunken? Did the people that were here get drowned or just get deleted outright? Was it instantaneous thinking? Were they at sea? And again, adding yes and allowing improvisation. The final thing is Demon Hide, which is the second of the two resources that were sort of what we're providing to realms. Is Demon Hide is sort of intended to be sort of a magical and elemental fire object, presumably from a defeated demon in some regard. Maybe it was harvested from the volcano itself. And the idea is to sort of to differentiate Demon Hide from Dragon Hide. Maybe it's a little more hidey and less scaly. And narratively, it could be that this is the cause of the cataclysmic event. That could be one potential angle for it. But again, the goal is sort of to create to open up all of these narrative threads that other people can tie together, when they create their content, because that is sort of the responsibility that we feel Crypts and Caverns needs to deliver. And I'll hand it back to you, Sri.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you so much for giving this overview. We've actually spent a lot of time. I would just first of all thank Ira because he spent so much time going through this along with Anoncat and talking through this, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from a small group of people who are familiar with the lore. I think that I'm really excited because I don't always think about where these places came from. I don't always think about where these objects came from, and I really like how you're highlighting that. So I think this is awesome. We'll talk more about this in the coming weeks, but hopefully this gives everyone a high-level sense of what resources are going to be brought through. And so just to wrap it up on the Crypts and Caverns side, the key takeaways, if you have a few things that you take with you after this talk, is one, the teams are working together as one team. You can hear the way Ira's talking is he's thinking about how this fits into realms, how this fits into loot. I'm doing the same thing. In fact, a lot of my time recently has been spent on some of the earlier UI that Loaf sent, for example, or some other things going on with realms. If you look at my commits, I'm helping with readmes across the realms ecosystem, not just on the Crypts integration. Second is that dungeon resources are unique. These are not just taking realms resources and letting you get 2 to 3 more of them. They are separate. Third, and most importantly, is there are 2 phases, the staking and the dungeons game. And so the resources we just talked about are primarily things we've been thinking about from the staking side of things. We haven't ironed out exactly how the dungeons game is going to work. We have a high-level idea, but we need to dig into the details. And so that bullet point 4 is key. We're still figuring out the details. There are questions like, how do legendary maps fit into this, and making sure that those really, really special kind of cataclysmic events and important moments in Lootverse history are treated with the level of magnitude that they should. There's questions around how do you actually play the game in the dungeon. So a lot of those things are going to be still figured out from this point on. But we wanted to share as much as possible of things that have been kind of locked down. We all have alignment on. We're going to keep moving with those. So hopefully this first little tidbit of information is helpful for this group. Really appreciate you giving us the time and letting us chat through this. And I'm going to hand it back to Loaf.
Yes, thank you, Threep and Ira. It's been great working together, and as Threep said, we're basically working as one team now, sharing resources and hitting roadmap deadlines together rather than independently. So we're sharing what we're all good at across both projects. I think now we can take. I'll just do a quick. So this is our internal milestones. I'll just be quick on this. Currently, Settling Game is in its alpha stage, and we're planning on deploying it to testnet next week. Now, it's just like an internal test. It's not the actual. You won't be able to play it. But the way we're developing it is we have our contracts team and we have our UI team and the indexer team. And so each team, now that we have the indexer running, each team can work independently from one another, which allows for faster iteration. The first milestone, Settling Game. Second milestone, crafting, dungeon staking. Third milestone is the loot items and the characters. And then the fourth is the dungeons game, which Threep just talked about. This is just our internal focus. If you keep an eye on the GitHub commits, you'll see what's going on, and we'll keep everyone updated on this status. So I think we can have a Q&A now. We're through everything that we want to get through. So I'm just going to look at the questions. Neo asks, will Wonder holders get a share of the CC resources? Currently, no. That's not baked in.
Harsh truths for Loaf.
Sorry. Yeah. This is a big economic system that we're working on. And look, I'm not saying that it might never happen, but it's definitely not in the current roadmap. So, I think were there any random questions in the Realms chat? Was it all in the Realms table? Oh, sorry, I haven't been looking. I'm just looking now. Okay. Oh, Does the winning team get to keep the losing team tokens? Circumference. So the way Desiege works is you won't get the other tokens. You'll be able to redeem a special type of token if you're on the winning team, relative to how many tokens you've spent in the game. And then that token that you claim will have a unique exchange rate for an item in the main game later down the road. I think that's unless I'm somebody missing. Oh, people are typing. Will each Ember Glows emit the same quantity of Demon Hide? Yeah, so the Crypt staking mechanics is similar to the Realms staking mechanics in how much they generate. Yeah, they'll generate the same quantity. They'll generate the same quantity. The way the output is determined is by the well, actually that's not it. All the crypts will emit the same amount, and it's based off the rarity, like the quantity basically. So that's how it's balanced.
And
the
one thing we haven't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Luke.
I was just going to say it's like we're balancing the crypts resources with like the realms resources, so they're relatively when the crafting module comes out, the because there's only 6 crypts, 6 types of crypts, and there's 22 different resources. The each type of crypts resources will kind of match approximately a kind of level of realms resources output. If that makes sense. More details on that will come. We're still working out the fine tunings because we're working on the crafting module at the moment, which will allow you to craft items with both types of resources. But yeah, more to come. But yeah, 3, you go in.
Yeah, the 2 items I would add is I think that it's likely that legendary maps will have a different, either a different quantity output. The legendary maps will have some special attributes to them. We haven't ironed out exactly what that is yet, so we didn't want to share that detail today. And second is just I want to stress the importance that what we shared today is all about the crypt staking. You'll probably find that as we dig into the dungeons game, that the mechanics might be different. Different dungeons might have different levels of output, etc. But from the staking perspective, which is the first part, then I think the answer is exactly as Lord represented it.
Yes. So yeah, more details on that will come as we iron it out. But we just don't. We're not going to release any numbers until we're certain. Tondi just asked what happens when all the Genesis adventures go to the same realm. World explosion. This is the other big update that Tim, myself, a lot of the team members, Anon, Shmi, where the loot distillation contract is heavily in a work in progress, and we're working out a lot of the fine details. This is a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. But from a high level point of view, you'll be able to stake you'll be able to distill your Genesis adventure into its parts, and then you'll be able to reassemble them into a character on StarkNet. So the items will be individual, and then you'll be able to equip them to the slots. So you could recreate your Genesis adventure on StarkNet. And in terms of staking on a realm, like a character on a realm, there'll be a limit to how many that can be staked on a specific realm. So there'll be a cap.
I love that you answered his question seriously just now, and that also was some alpha you just threw out into the world.
Wow.
I think Tondi was just giving us a hard time. I love it.
Yeah, that was a good question, though.
Hey, Lord, no one really asked about your lore module stuff, but I can speak to it if you want.
Yeah, I was. Go for
it. Was there a slide that had a screenshot of that? I know you flew through the beginning. I guess you hadn't shown the whole screenshot. Yeah, stay here for a sec. So just to share a little bit about what we're working on here. If you know me, you know that I am a storytelling nerd and geek and lore geek. And honestly, in real life, like I am truly a reader and a writer and a geek. And in real life, I guess I'm also a boring tech co-founder. But the reason that I've been so like fully and absolutely nerd sniped by this loot world is about this vision of creating this decentralized, collaborative, and weaved together universe. And what Loaf has been working on, and what we collectively have been working on, but behind the scenes with respect to lore, is the manifestation of that dream on the Lootverse Bibliotheca Atlas. So what you're looking at right now is not the lore screen, but just sort of squint your eyes and open your mind for a second. Imagine that not only does this map have points of interest, which are realms and crypts and caverns and loot and Genesis loot and whatever else, loot explorers and more to come, but imagine that it also has stories in it, and not just lore, not just like snippets of facts, but real stories with beginnings and ends and characters and conflicts. This map will manifest some of those stories into the universe, visualized right on the map. And so imagine you're reading this, some story, whether it's the story of Kenea Nonu, which is Neotin's realm and Genesis adventure, or the story of Rave, the daughter of Raven, or the story of the two twin brothers or something, like a real story. Imagine you're reading that story inside of the Lootverse Atlas, and along the way, every time it mentions a point of interest, whether it's a Genesis adventure or a loot bag or the realm that you're on or a crypt or whatever, that every time you arrive at a point of interest, you click on it, it surfaces that point of interest, in this case on the right, here you're looking at Stolze, but that it's this hyper-connected, extremely weaved together story that brings life to the whole Lootverse. Brings life to every one of these NFTs. So these NFTs are not just like collector's items in our wallets, but they're scaffolding for stories and they're canvases for stories. So I know we're not yet ready to share the screenshots of that, but if people are excited about that, let's talk more about it. I think more eyes, more UX advice, and even just writers and storytellers, feedback from the community who's thinking about this stuff and working on this stuff. Now is the time. I think we're really close. I don't want to give a timeline, Loaf, but I feel like the stuff you and I were even working on yesterday is like right around the corner from being able to say, let's ship an alpha version of it.
Yeah.
But what I just want to like land that thought. The thought for me is like, if we can use Bibliotheca's DAO and use realms as the foundation for this, and use the energy coming out of this community as the foundation for this, I think we can weave together this like still infinitely expansive but also cohesive universe. And if you haven't heard me talk about this before, I'll just say it again, just so I can put more words to it. That the dream here is like a Game of Thrones or a Lord of the Rings or a Star Wars that clearly have physics that are shared. It's clearly in space. It clearly has the Force, or it clearly has the White Walkers. Like there's foundational concepts, but then infinite space for stories. But instead of being owned by HBO or Disney, this can be collectively owned in a decentralized way by the builders and players who are all creating it. And to me, that's exciting because we can go past just a bunch of like random fantasy words that are all thrown around in unconnected projects. August, September, October of the Lootverse was that. It was like random, unconnected craziness, all using the same words, but like pretty unconnected and not weaved together. What's happened since then, like Loot Chapter 2 or Epoch 2, that probably started like October of last year and it was really coming to life now, is this cohesive and compelling universe anchored in the foundational principles of not just loot, but also realms. And so I think of loot and realms as the foundational physics for the Lootverse that we're all building. The resources, the places, the map, and I guess in a lot of ways this like collective team. Not only is there like a biblio team, but there's also a loot team, and we're all part of it. And so this lore module, even though it's going to be code on page and it's going to be still just words on a screen, I think it's really going to be really meaningful in terms of turning the corner and really bringing to life the Lootverse and showing people that there can be narrative storytelling across the realms that bridges and weaves together all of this stuff. So you can tell in my voice I'm excited about it, and it's right around the corner, the first version of this.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close. I think in the next week we'll have some early prototypes. Lord Abrax has been plowing ahead, writing the back end for that. So it's quite an innovative solution. So it'll be interesting.
And I haven't seen any NFT project do this. We've seen projects do lore, where it's like, if you own the NFT, you can write the story of that character. And that's amazing. Chain Runners, Forgotten Runes are pioneering lore. What else? Well, there's a bunch of examples of like that type of thing. The Crypts, whatever. But what we're talking about here goes beyond lore. It's really storytelling. And storytelling that's permissionless in the spirit of loot and open and connected across these different points of interest. And the way I'm thinking about it, the mental model that I think we've all aligned on that we're going to test and battle test and see if it works is the idea that anyone can create permissionlessly stories that touch any of these realms, any of these caverns, any of these GAs, any of this loot, whatever. Anyone can create. The owner can curate, and then the community can moderate. And I think, even though that sounds pretty simple and maybe a little scary, I think that's going to unlock a ton of opportunity for us to come together and use the Atlas as kind of an invitation to build together, and an invitation to create these narrative stories together.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that whole lore module will be all interwoven into the Atlas. So you'll be able to, on the right-hand side, it'll pop up and it will say GA 200 once interacted with, GA 85, and then you click on GA 85 and it takes you to GA 85. So it's all this big interconnected web of stories that's interactive throughout the whole world. So yeah, more to come on that. But it will be running on StarkNet and be fully on-chain using Arweave or IPFS to store the information.
Yeah, Loaf, next time we talk about that, why don't we do some fancy slides so we can be as articulate and pointed as Threep was just there?
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
The
TLDR of that is lore is coming. It's more than just lore. It's going to be lore in the loot way, and lore in the loot way meaning permissionless and open and an invitation to everybody to build together, and with loot and realms at the core foundation of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we should. If anyone has any questions, you can just unmute yourself if you like. I think, Squiddy, have you done the mass mute or the mass unmute? You might have to leave and come back in, I think, if you can't unmute yourself. I'm not quite sure how that works. Anybody? All right, well, you've been going for an hour now. A few people. Nope. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions about what we discussed today, or if anything pops up, just drop them in the chat. We'll respond, and we'll drop these notes and the slides in as a PDF a bit later today.
Good work, Loaf. We appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Likewise. All right. Well, let's end it there then. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and look forward to talking again. Probably not the lengthy space between this and the last one. As I said, I think I said in one of the slides, we're going to do a Builder Council specific one. We'll go over some more. Go over the ways that you can contribute to the DAO in an easier fashion. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.